So firstly, I need to address something. You guys are basically the best. I made the L's theme video on a whim, and honestly, I expected no one to care about it that much. To see the outpouring of love for this idea made me happy to a degree I can't even express, so thank you guys so much. Also, man, there are a ton of video ideas I can do now. I got requests for everything from Madoka Magica's character themes to Clannad tracks to more Death Note, of course, and really just a pile of things. There really is no shortage of things to cover, and considering the only other anime music-focused YouTuber doesn't post all that often, this series is kind of an important one to me personally. I think this should be a really fun series. Also, a note before I start, I will be doing a variety of things with these videos. Some will be more akin to the last video, whereas others will be more like this one with a different tone. It should help to spice things up every now and then. Now, with all that out of the way, on to the main subject. Now, as far as requests went, by far I saw the most requests for Madoka Magica tracks, and I know why. Each track has huge hidden meanings and interesting parallels to the anime itself. Trust me when I say this, I will be getting to all of them, just at differing points. I'm not sure how people would react to several Madoka videos in a row, so we'll spread them out. I had something that I wanted to cover first, however, because it's a video I've wanted to get to for a long time. Now, one of the most notorious tracks in the anime, ironically enough, is the opening, Connect. It's not just popular for its overall quality, and I mean, of course it's amazing, but there's something that goes a bit deeper than that. Oftentimes, the opening is cited as a facade, a fake opening to try and hide Madoka's true intentions. Some have gone to such lengths to call the opening unfitting to the series itself, citing the general happy tone that the opening is supposed to have. Many also cite the visuals as a farce, and will go to such lengths to say that, despite liking the song, that it doesn't really fit with the tone of the series itself. I have analyzed this opening many times, and I have to say I disagree with that notion. In fact, after looking over the opening itself, it's become clear to me that there's a lot more hiding behind the surface, actually going much farther to embody this series itself than most people would likely believe. Sit tight, get those contracts ready, and perhaps listen to the full terms of the deal before making it, because we're going to tear this opening apart piece by piece. So firstly, I need to tackle the melody and music itself. Now, speaking on the tone of the music, whether the track is sad sounding or happy sounding is neither here or there in some regards. On one end, a majority of Magical Girl openings feature a track that is much more upbeat than this one. There are exceptions, but a decent chunk of them seem to have this J-pop-esque tone to them, whereas Madoka Magica's opening sounds far from that. However, on the other side, this music's tone isn't what I'd call sad either. It's a weird middle-of-the-road kind of music. Regardless, combined with the visuals and the opening, I believe that this opening in fact does represent the series it comes from. The intro, which begins with an utter lack of background music, sounds melancholic, which works especially in its favor when watching the image of Madoka crying. In fact, not only is she crying, but she's crying in the middle of an empty field far away from human contact. The blue dots, though they initially may seem to be an aesthetic choice to make things look more interesting, are more likely to be representative of snow. I say this because the next scene changes the dots to a multitude of colors when Madoka isn't present, so choosing the white field with blue dots for the scene can't be a coincidence. Now, why is snow so important, you ask? Well, typically in literature, snow and winter can be seen as the representation of oncoming death. Winter is the death of a year, and likewise winter is oftentimes connected with the death of a character. So, combining the general melancholic tone and the visuals, the opening is basically screaming at you that Madoka is going to die, but considering her eyes are closed, she will be completely unaware of her imminent death, which bodes well for the whole time loop mechanic the show utilizes. Now, the next part would seem a bit more unfitting, and that comes as no surprise. The music picks up in tone as images of Madoka's failed attempts at being a magical girl are shown. Much like she does several times in the show, Madoka wakes up from a dream. These weren't two completely unconnected parts. The first part was a dream, a fantasy. This part of the intro was trying to outright warn you that the ideal of the fun magical girl life wasn't going to happen. Also, note that she's in a bed, lying down, eternally rolling over, unable to commit to either going to the fantasy or real life world. She's stuck in an endless loop because, much like the show itself, Madoka is chained by fate. She's never allowed to truly move on in one way or another, so she's stuck there, endlessly struggling. Also, just a tip, Typically, lying down is a symbol of death, and this isn't the last time you'll see it in this opening. Now, I'll agree that the music during these aspects is a bit strange in that it sounds alarmingly more positive. I'm not sure it matters, however, because of an aspect I will be discussing later in this video. For now, know that, regardless of this middle of the song tone, the song will sink in tone again later. The next section is more interesting in that it's likely the thing that confused the most people on an initial viewing. Why are there two Madokas, and why are they naked and hugging each other? This, however, like the rest of the opening, has a meaning to it as well. The second Madoka is specifically the Goddess Madoka. The kiss on the forehead and the transformation scene are likely more meant to be taken as Madoka finally reaching enlightenment at the end of the series, becoming the goddess to save all the magical girls. Also, the nudity and the area they're in points to this being Goddess Madoka because these aspects are only seen during the parts where Madoka is already transcended. The only part of this opening that doesn't fit is the character shots that pop up in the next scene. They could just be filler footage, or perhaps they have a meaning in the next scene, but this part does genuinely feel like it was created to fit the facade, which isn't quite as interesting or fun as the rest of the opening. This is where the tone takes its next jump, however. You see, Madoka is portrayed running while the music takes a notable tone drop. This run is clearly being forced against by external methods, as seen in the multitude of rain throughout the scene that is being shot diagonally by the wind itself. This force proves to be a lot for Madoka, as the run she's doing isn't just a normal run. The way in which the running progresses seems almost like a sprint for dear life, considering the amount of time she almost trips. Also, her face is not one of bravery or pride, but one of genuine fear and depression. Combining these visuals with the music itself, and it almost gives off the impression that the singer themselves is crying out. It sounds desperate, like the struggle the show portrays itself. This also happens to be the most visually impressive part of the opening, and easily my favorite part not only for its depth, but for just how beautiful it looks. The next scene starts with Madoka opening her eyes. If it wasn't for the cat, this would seem bizarre upon initial viewings, because why would they showcase her waking up? Interestingly enough, however, the next scene utilizes the same cat, but alongside it has Madoka not only crying, but laying down on the water with her eyes closed. This, combined with the music, which is beginning to sound more somber than anything, should be a telltale sign of death. Literally, the only thing that's missing is snow, but this has a much more interesting aspect. You see, Madoka is floating on the top of the water, not even being slightly submerged. Since this is likely before she became a god, this is likely a symbol of a baptism, or specifically that she never attains one at this point. Even taking it out of a religious context, with Madoka not being submerged, it means she's unable to change. She's unable to move on, which is what a baptism in fictional media typically represents. So, portraying her above the water like this was likely done in an effort to draw parallels with Madoka's eventual change into the goddess of the magical girls, and makes for an interesting scene altogether. The last serious thing of note comes in the next scene, where, much more befitting of the tone of the actual series, the art is dark, menacing, and uncomfortable. The camera moves wildly, only highlighting quick flashes of Madoka and Homura. There's not as much to this scene, but regardless it should give off the impression that perhaps this show is hiding something more sinister beneath the surface. And then it ends on a picture that can be best described as reminding you that neither Mami or Sayaka will survive the initial arc. Now, I think the reason why some label this song as fitting and others don't is because of context. If you are actively connecting the gruesome events surrounding Madoka Magica with the song itself, it's likely that you'll begin to perceive the track as sad. You associate each death and each terrible moment with the track because you hear it every episode just about. Others don't make this type of association, and thus will see it as an unfitting track. I'd argue that, personally at least, this track combined with the visuals makes for a track that is outright somber, but that's just me. Regardless, even if you disagree, just hearing the opening might just conjure up some memories of the series itself and the many, many depressing moments throughout.